Good morning. Thank you for joining us on Resource Center. This is Audrey Raj. It is technically the first working Tuesday of the month. So Hetal Doshi is on the show with me today for another episode of Psychology at Work. Kong Si Fa Chai, Hetal.
Kong Si Fa Chai, Audrey. Thank you so much for having me today.
Now, we're going to be tackling some pain points on the show today, when it comes to mental health in the workplace. And you're going to be basically giving us a rundown of the 9 reasons why mental health strategies in the workplace don't work. But before we jump into that, right, Hazel, maybe you can give us a lay of the land into why we're talking about some of these strategies adopted at organizations in the country today, and why we're talking about the strategies that don't work, especially in the workplace.
Yeah, I think it is, officially the 3rd year where organizations, so this is year 3 of implementation. Yeah. So the pandemic, actually, I'm not saying that organizations haven't been, having mental health strategies in the workplace prior to the pandemic, but there's been a big wave that started 2 years ago, and this is the 3rd year. So what is happening in year 3 and the calls that we're receiving is all about what has been implemented. And the big question is, why is it still not working? Meaning, why are employees still sharing information or raising voice in the organization that they don't feel well, and that things may not be progressing based on these strategies that organizations have already implemented. And so there's this sense of frustration about investments, about direction, about approach, and is it the right thing that we have done? Why is it that it doesn't seem to be hitting the nail? And what can we do from here? And this has been, well, like you say, it's first day of January now, and in the first month we've been getting lots of calls to ask to have an insight into why strategies don't seem to be working.
Okay, so what is the first of the 9 reasons why these mental health strategies are not cutting it in the workplace?
Yeah, so the first reason is because it's opinion based. A lot of the opinions that have come into the equation have been from, maybe what you call the highest income paid person's opinion. So what CEOs or committees, wellness committees think is the right thing to be doing. But what is shocking for me is that it shouldn't be opinion based. Obviously, it should be evidence based and data driven based, right? So what is the psychological aspects of it? As you would know, most organizations don't have a psychologist. So without that level of expertise, jumping into opinions may not be helpful. So let me just give you a very simple example. When I ask for example, clients, okay, what are you actually measuring, or what is it that you want? They say, we want mental health in the workplace. But the way they speak about mental health sounds like mental illness. We don't want mental illness rather than mental health. The second thing is that when I ask them, can you define mental health? The definition is not there. So I think first and foremost, organizations haven't even pinned down what are definitions of mental health, definitions of well-being, and a very important part of what should be pinned down is something called psychosocial risk as well. Meaning, what are the things in the organization that are putting people at risk? So from an evidence-based perspective, I can already see that terminologies are not clear, definitions are not clear, the right types of things to be looking at are not clear at all. So the biggest challenge around the first part of it is that the initial strategy or the initial idea of how to launch this were probably created by non-experts in the workplace, which is not entirely wrong, but I mean, this is, people's minds, so I think it is very important to make sure that you have an expert on board when you are crafting up strategies.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So what's our next reason? What's reason number 2?
So the reason number 2 is why they were actually doing it. So when I ask clients, why did you initiate this 2 years ago? And I think it was a big wave, right? So pandemic was a fear-based approach towards what they needed to do. And of course, with strategies, you never want to have a fear-based approach. You want to have it as a goal-oriented approach. So because of that fear, a lot of initiatives, like for example, we want to make sure that suicide is, we don't have any experiences of suicide in the workplace. We don't have mental illness. So these are all fear-based experiences. And if you look at mental illness in the workplace or, extremities like suicide, that would make up 5% of an entire experience of 100% in the organization. Would you want major strategies that look after 5%, or do you want major strategies that look after the 95, obviously plus the 5% as well? The other second reason was that there was a bandwagon fad. A lot of them jumped into it. A lot of them said, okay, let's do EAP, let's do this. So there's a whole, bandwagon fad of people jumping into it at the same time. So if you mix fear together with herd mentality, you probably get a lot of confusion. So what this means is that, going forward, it's okay. I think it's very common that organizations experience this fear-based approach and also bandwagon approach. But what we would shift towards going forward is a clear purpose with world-class standards. Yeah. What do I really mean by that is actually there are world-class standards for employee experience or mental health in the workplace, and this is called ISO 45003. So you don't want to benchmark your organization against anything except world-class standards. So what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Match it towards world-class standards. So ISO 45003 looks after psychosocial risk in the workplace, which means employees should have very minimal risk in the workplace, and that is the job of an organization. It's not about necessarily creating mental wellness, but reducing the risk that you impose on the organization. We've got 20 factors, we won't go into that. But there's ISO 45003, and there's also World Health Organization that actually has a goal called well-being for all is everybody's right. And so, when you take these two world-class standards, there's actually measures in place that you could subscribe to. And as you go year after year, you can see whether you're progressing towards that. Unfortunately, because without clear purpose and world-class standards, all initiatives have been all over the place. And so there's this lack of clarity about what actually are we driving towards. So that's the second reason why, lack of purpose and direction towards world-class standards. That would be the second one.
Okay, and the biggest challenge for the second one, this bandwagon and this in being led by fear, what's the biggest challenge? Would it be expertise again?
Yeah, I think it's that lack of expertise. So you definitely would want to have an expert that specifically looks after this strategy. And typically it would be an organizational psychologist, maybe even an occupational health psychologist, or maybe an OHS, occupational health and safety expert. To look into something like this, but also very important to actually facilitate and bring everybody together on the same page so that opinions aren't flying around. So it's not just an expert, but somebody who can really bring the core people around and make them very clear about doing it. Because one of the things that I've also heard is that some companies are doing this to get awards and, that's great, but it's not, the most, I think you'd get an award anyway if you're doing great things. So I don't think that should be the primary reason for it. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on then, Hetal. What's next? What's reason number 3?
So reason number 3 is what gets measured gets done, right? Or what doesn't get measured doesn't get done.
Yep.
So one of the things that people were measuring, Audrey, one of the things that when I ask clients, like, how have you been auditing? Like, okay, when you talk about the state of mental health in the workplace, what have you been looking at? How have you been measuring it? And they say, Hetal, we don't know how to measure it. We've been looking at maybe absenteeism. So absenteeism doesn't mean that you're mentally not well. Absenteeism could be that you just want to take a day off, or that you're not feeling engaged. Could be a plethora of reasons, but it's not. Absenteeism may or may not have anything to do with it. So it's not a direct correlation. Then another measure would be, suicides or attempted suicides. Another measure could be prolonged mental illness. So some employees specifically have MCs where the doctors or the psychiatrists have put in reasons saying that, they are experiencing mental illness and they will need time out for extensive period of time. So they look at that, which is all right, but that is a measure of mental illness, not a measure of mental health. You've also got medical board outs where people leave the organization because of psychological experiences in the workplace. And then you've got EAP, which is the Employee Assistance Program, where people can make calls. But EAP is not the right measure either, because you want to encourage people to make calls and speak to psychologists, but that doesn't mean that they're having mental health related issues. We don't know. You could just be calling because you're calling, and actually you want more people to be calling because it's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So there are many of these tools that are being used, but these may not necessarily be the right tool. And also when organizations look at all the data, they're like, how do we make sense of this? What does it mean, right? So, the important thing over here is what gets measured gets done. And so a very distinctive measure is important. So what we promote from our area of expertise is something called psychosocial risk. So what are the risks? And there is a direct correlation between the risk that you put an employee in, and the well-being that they will experience. So let me give you an example. I think most of us are going through high workload right now, right? Most of us feel, from our data, the second thing would be that our work life is impacted. And the third thing is organizational voice. Means I don't have the voice to fight this, and there is no respect and justice for me. This is the order of experiences that we are having, and we call this psychosocial risk. So we measure what is the risk that the organization is putting people through. And you get a very clear correlated data. And organizations can immediately say, okay, we need to address this risk. Not we need to create yoga classes or, like another well-being webinar. If it is high workload, we have to address high workload. So it's a very clear, distinctive measure. And another thing is well-being. So we measure well-being and we say, okay, mental well-being, emotional, social well-being. These are three areas of well-being, and we equip everybody to intervene for themselves. So it's a very, very direct measure. And we highly recommend that everybody follows this pathway. And we call it a 2x2 matrix, where you look at the risk and you look at the wellness, and combine both in our matrix. It pushes you towards world-class standards of ISO and WHO as well. Just right. These two things that you need to look at. Of course, you can add more, but these will be the two major ones which organizations still actually don't understand at this point in time. And we are figuring out how to, as they say, play with the data rather than actually use the data to explain to us what's going on.
Okay. Hetal, it's already time for us to take a quick break for some messages. But when we come back, we'll race through the other 6 reasons why mental health strategies in the workplace aren't working at the moment. All that and more coming up on Resource Center. Stay tuned, BFM 89.9.
Business, finance, and music. BFM 89.9.
You are listening to Resource Center. This is Audrey Raj, organizational psychologist and CEO of OSAIC. Hetal Doshi is online with me today, and we are discussing the 9 reasons why mental health strategies in the workplace don't work. Now, Hetal, we are now on reason number 4. What is reason number 4?
Reason number 4 is there are a lot of activities and initiatives in organizations. Organizations don't have any lack of it. So what do I mean by that? Most organizations have already launched like bi-weekly or weekly wellness webinars.
And like the yoga classes you were talking about earlier.
Nothing wrong with that at all. But these are what we call activities and initiatives, right? But they are not necessarily insightful interventions. So what does that mean, right? We are launching activities, but what pain does it actually solve, if at all? So the idea is to remove as much pain as possible so that employees can have the freedom to basically work, right? So what we have done at OSAIC and what we have realized is that organizations, after they do the survey, right? From their survey, they don't know what to do. So that's the big question. Like, I've got all this data, I understand that people are going through this. Now, what do we do with it? And that's where the misalignment between initiatives versus actually insightful interventions. So what we have done is that we've actually taken through teams. Like, for example, we've had a project where we had 10 teams and they went through from the data that they saw about what they were experiencing. They were like, okay, what interventions do we come up with? What we realized was that it's very important that the organization doesn't butt into interventions. Organization's job is not to come up with interventions. Organization's job is to get everybody to talk about interventions that they want. So we came up with these teams. When they look at the data, they said the smartest thing to do is for us to come up with our own interventions, because a lot of us say one team, one dream, the whole organization is one big dream, but it's not. It's many teams made up with many dreams. So each team actually came up with their own team interventions. This is what we want in a particular budget. This is what we think will fix our drama. Leave us alone, we will sort out our own drama. And within the team, the individuals say, actually, I have been creating some drama as well. I, on an individual level, will also sort out my drama. And then they made a request like, leader, this is one thing you can do within your control to make our life better. So we had leadership, team, and individual interventions designed by the team itself. And what was very interesting for me, Audrey, the most interesting part wasn't necessarily about the interventions, because eventually everybody came up with interventions that worked. after a month when we measured, everybody was doing very well. 9 out of 10 teams did significantly better as a team just by talking about it. What was interesting for me wasn't necessarily the intervention bit, but the fact that when I looked at it a bit deeper, I experienced something called the know, care, and do model. Meaning, some people actually know what the drama is, but they don't care enough to then do something about it. So leaders may actually know that there's some drama going on, like high workload or work-life conflict or whatever, but they may not care enough to figure out what is the right thing to do about it. Whereas there were some who knew and they cared, but they didn't know. The teams that did the best were obviously where every single person felt, okay, we know, we care, and we're going to do something about it. And truly, it's not about interventions, but the fact of the matter is, do you know enough, do you care enough, and do you actually do something enough as a team? Not as a leader or as an individual, but as a team, you're actually talking about it, just like a family, sitting down and actually sorting out our issues together as well. And this is not necessarily about mental health per se, but it's about psychosocial health, meaning me and the people in my environment, in our environment, working out a better life experience for all of us. So it's not just me, it's something that we all have to do together. And for me, that was the biggest part. It wasn't the intervention, it was the fact that we know enough, we care enough, and we do something about it as a team. So I was quite blown away by that. I wouldn't call it interventions anymore. I would just call it, do you know, do you care, and what do we do? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but I think a lot of people are going through their own challenges especially over the last 2 years, and that level of apathy is just continuing to rise. And, if there's one place where you can try and like not absorb any unnecessary drama would be in the workplace, because you'd want to reserve that mental space for yourself and what, your family needs and things like that. So, yeah, I can understand why that could be prevailing in the workplace.
100%. And the beautiful thing about what you said over there was that the workplace can be that space, right? A refuge of sorts, because what we found in our assessment was that meaning of work was the best experience that people had. People actually love their jobs. I'm shocked at how much people actually love their jobs. So it's not the jobs. We talk about meaning of work. That's not the problem. The problem is that sometimes with people, we get in the way of ourselves, right? And the second thing that you said was that it can be a refuge, which is a beautiful thing to say. And that's why a lot of like the World Health Organization or ISO, all of these global standards are moving towards saying the workplace is one of the best places to create a better community for the nations that we live in. So yes, the workplace, we have that responsibility, but also that huge opportunity as well. It's a fantastic phenomena with lots of opportunities, not only from a mental health perspective, but you can create a better organization with a lot more money that you generate just by creating the right environment. So yeah, thanks for that insight as well, Audrey.
Okay, so we're moving on now to number 5, reason number 5.
Yeah, reason number 5, very simple. Instead of committee-led, create a community. So the burden of a great experience cannot just be within a certain level or certain person. The burden, or actually the opportunity of creating a great experience, should be something called psychosocial, which is every single person, me and the people around me as a community. Because the truth is, Audrey, if you were going through something in your workplace, for example, sorry if I'm crossing any boundaries, I don't think you're going to go to your CEO. I don't think you're going to go to HR. You're probably going to tell your best friend. So it is about how best friends and how friends in the organization actually take care, support each other, and look after the environment, make it a bit better. So it's a community-driven approach, a very simple one, but very profound. No more committee-led, but more community-driven and empowered of sorts as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So reason number 6 is about bulldozing.
Yeah, I think, so let me give you an example. Yeah. Just recently we had a particular experience where psychosocial risk was very high in a particular team, meaning that they were going through a lot of stress. And they came to me and they said, okay, let's design a lot of interventions. So instead of actually designing the interventions, we want to, and bulldozing, right? Okay, let's come up with solution like a Panadol effect. Let's sort this out. Let's fix this problem. We have 3 months. She's taking time out to understand what the elephant was. And we realized that the elephant was just one person, which was the leader. And the leader himself or herself was actually going through enough of stress, unknowingly creating and compounding that stress onto other people. So instead of like bulldozing and getting everybody to resolve the issue, maybe it was just that one elephant that needed to be addressed. And, by addressing one elephant, and I'm not saying a person is an elephant, but, an experience, the root cause of that experience with the elephant, you can save a lot of time, you can save a lot of money, and you don't have to bring everybody together. Just taking care of that one thing, and maybe everything else gets a little bit better. But that is the hard thing. So what we say is not just trying to do things, but actually doing the right thing would be quite difficult. And I see that as the most difficult of things to be able to handle in a workplace, because people will come in with investments, they will talk about strategy, they'll talk about everything, but the right thing to do, which is to address the elephant.
Are organizations having trouble identifying these elephants?
They are, because we're not using the right kind of assessment tool. So if you address it the right way, you could immediately figure out where the elephant is. So yeah, if you're using wrong measurement, you will never be able to get the root cause.
Okay, let's move on to reason number 7.
Yeah, I'm going to combine 7 and 8 together, which is about systems and learning. So, just like our body is basically a system that works in hopefully harmony, yeah? And if it's not, then it creates sickness. The same thing with mental health as a strategy. It should be a system where everything is working in accordance with each other and harmony, and there's some kind of learning that comes out of it. So we call this the strength of the system or the weakness of the system. And the whole idea is, how do you audit and learn from the weakening of the system and the strengthening? So I'll give you an example over here. Recently, a particular town hall, what we heard from a leader was that, guys, mental well-being is a very important priority in 2022. And in the same breath of the sentence, we have a lot of competition, guys. We have to make sure that we, meet higher standards than we had last year. We have to collaborate more. So the idea and the intention of well-being combined together with enormous amount of fear and anxiety about competition in one breath, right? So are we strengthening the system, or are we weakening the system? So just by what we call signaling, right? So as you signal in your communication, you signal in your rewards, your recognition, the signaling, is it going haywire, or is it actually hitting like laser pointer towards the circle, or the bulldoze, that circle in the middle of it,
the target?
Yeah, and what we realize is that it's not actually as simple as a bulldoze or not a bulldoze. What we're realizing is that the signals are all out of whack. The signals are in organizations are never really targeted and all aligned to one space. It's constantly kind of hitting itself and dissipating and going in different angles. And so what we do is something called auditing and learning. And what does it do? Because human beings, we are big masters of contradiction as well. We tend to contradict ourselves a lot. And I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. I could start with myself. Yeah, we have a lot of great intent, but when it comes to execution, especially when it's times of crisis, we tend to go against what we truly believe in as well. So that, I think, would be two things that I would definitely combine: systems and learning from the system itself.
Okay, and we're now down to our final reason, Hazel, and why? For some reason, I think this comes down to money.
I mean, yes, of course, it comes down to money. It comes down to time, energy, and money, right? Sometimes, as I've seen, Audrey, like time has become an even bigger cost to an organization by doing something wrong than the money itself. Anyway, we call this investment of time, money, and energy. So how do we invest wisely is a very important question over here. What I'm seeing organizations do is they separate their investments from HR, learning, employee well-being, and the separate one for well-being. You don't have to separate it. Actually, you don't come up with new investments. Really, really just understand that mental health has always been, all organizations have always cared about it in some way or the other. You just want to make sure that you're a bit conscious about what you're doing and reprioritize your investments and kind of integrate it. So my recommendation to all organizations would be not to create new investments, but actually reprioritize your investments and make sure that it's integrated, because you already have something that is going for you. Because all organizations care about making money, growing, but also they've always cared about their people. So don't come up with something new. Just strengthen what you have. Maybe if you have to eradicate it or rejig it, that's fine, but just understand that it's always been there already. So yeah, my recommendation would be, don't come up with more, time costs, money costs, all of that. Figure out how you can do this with inexpensive tools. It doesn't have to be expensive at all. And with that, there are these 9 things that we've been experiencing in organizations. But overall, I think, everyone, every client, every person, company that I've spoken to, I think everybody's doing their best and we're all figuring it out the way that we're going. There's no such thing as right or wrong, obviously. There's just progress over perfection, and I couldn't be more proud of how Malaysia actually, or at least corporate Malaysia, is taking this so seriously. And 3 years into it, it still is number one priority for all organizations that I know of, at least.
Right. I mean, like we're all learning as, we're living in unprecedented times, right? And the needs are also unprecedented to a certain extent. And so, Hetal, just before I let you go, I think when we were discussing these 9 reasons, I noticed that the biggest challenge, I think, for most of these strategies is a lack of expertise or a lack of the right tools to assess what is really the issue with their employees. So it's mostly just not having the right people or the right way to facilitate the issue, or just not completely understanding what your employees are going through. Did I get that right? Am I understanding this right?
Perfectly. You couldn't have said that any better. It's a better summary than mine for sure. Having the right expertise, having the right tools, and having the right facilitators. And that could be internal or external, it doesn't matter, but really the right person to get this job done in the right way and to see it through would be something that I feel is definitely lacking. Yeah.
All right. Okay. And Hetal, for our listeners tuning in right now who would like to learn more about what you do for corporate Malaysia and the organizations that you work with, maybe you can give them the website they can go to so that they can get in touch with you, Hetal.
Sure. We can be found at www.o-psych.com, or you can just ping me, as most of you have been doing, via LinkedIn, just saying hello and just put in your request. We're very happy to have an initial chat. And thank you so much, Audrey, for the opportunity to talk about something that is number one priority for most organizations right now.
And thank you for taking the time to speak with us once again, Hetal. Catch you again same time next month. I've been speaking with Hetal Doshi, organizational psychologist and CEO of OPsych. More Psychology at Work coming to you same time next month. That's the first Tuesday of every month right here on Resource Center. But till then, this is Audrey Raj for BFM 89.9, the business station.